Tay and Ellen Mahoney. It is such a privilege to meet these two in person. I am part of this Twitter chat, and so I feel like I am their best friend because we communicate so much through these Twitter chats, and I had the privilege of meeting them last year. Let me just tell you briefly a bit about them because they are two amazing individuals. Amanda is actually an adult TCK, and her interest is many things, but higher education, social justice, international affairs. I think what I so appreciate about Amanda is she's really bringing perspective to the Black expat and the Black TCK, and just some of what is going on in her studies of it and her interest in this is wonderful. Come on in. We're just
if you guys are on the left side, maybe move to the right so people can scan on that side. Tight squeeze.
Yes.
We'll leave the door open just for a minute so that latecomers can come in. And also, Amanda has founded FIGT Consulting, so you can look her up online. Then our second presenter is Ellen Mahoney. Ellen is the founder of a group called Sea Change Mentoring, and she is another third culture kid with a focus on career building and really helping. She's the kind of person that I wish had been around when I was entering into my college years. So welcome, and thank you all for coming and joining us for this discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, we are both very conversational in our approach. We both work with teenagers, so we're all about interaction and people just getting involved. But we want to tell you a little bit about TCKchat and why this community is important. So, honestly, TCKchat was sort of born out of FIGT. Many people, and I was not on there. Sorry, and people don't realize this. Ellen and I met at my first FIGT conference about 3 years ago, and we had a lot of similar stories. She grew up in Asia, I grew up in Africa, and we both were just talking about what it meant to be as Gen Xers, millennials, and some of the issues that we felt didn't get discussed widely in the expat and the third culture community. So we had this crazy idea to say, hey, let's use social media. They talk about digital natives. And let's figure out a way that we can interact and communicate with those that are interested in the TCK experience and have had those experiences. So we chose Twitter as our medium. I don't know how many of you use Twitter. Let me put it this way. How many of you have no idea what Twitter is? So you're not living in okay. No, because we have to ask. So basically, long story short, you put out 140 sentences out into the world, everyone can see it, and if they follow you, they comment. It's pretty simple. If you use Facebook, it's like the comment section in real time. So we decided we wanted to use TCK on Twitter because, quite frankly, we're global, we live all over the place, and that's the best way to find other TCKs. You type in third culture kid or TCK, and we find each other. So we established about 2 years ago to kind of further this dialogue. We have, as of February 2016, 10 moderators in 4 continents. They represent a really diverse section of the expat community. They have all had very wildly different experiences, but the one thing they had in common is that they said, I'm a kid who's been impacted by global mobility. And I think I'm going to let her kind of explain a little bit sort of from there.
Sure, yeah. So the way it works is we pick a theme, a topic for TCKs to talk about, and sometimes that's generated from the TCK Twitter community, and sometimes we'll come up with it on our own, or maybe someone might call us and say, oh, it'd be so cool to have a conversation with TCKs about this. And we pick that topic, and we're going to share what some of those more popular topics have been, but they can be everything from very serious stuff about identity and family to very fun and playful stuff like travel and food. And we create a list of questions, usually about 5 questions. And Amanda and I and the moderators will pose these questions on Twitter, and then the community will respond to those questions, all in 120 characters. So it's a conversation pace that you kind of have to get accustomed to. It's kind of cool. And then after those conversations, we create a Storify, which is another online application that sort of takes these sort of complex, logistically complex Twitter conversations and puts them into a story format. So if you're just a random person and you want to get a feel for what that conversation was about, you can follow along a little more easier. So, and since we got started, all these stories that we've been able to collect on all these various themes have now been used by counselors, by educators. I mean, Amanda's a counselor, I'm an educator, and we both, I know that it definitely informs our work, and it helps us. I think maybe one of the coolest things about it is that the third culture kids are the ones that are generating the conversation, so it's not like grown-ups or like older people, like another generation or an outsider group coming in and saying, this is the TCK experience, now we're going to talk about it like this. Instead, it's very grassroots. The TCKs that are involved are saying, no, we need to talk about this, and no one ever talks about this, but this has been my experience, and I think it's maybe a lot of other people's experience, and then we discover it together.
I think one thing I neglected to say in the beginning is that this is a regular event. We were bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks. We moved to monthly just because from an administration point, it's kind of crazy for our work schedules and whatnot. And we have 2 sessions. We run a session about 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time, so about 1500 hour UTC, and then we run a... What's your session?
All I know is I'm in California.
It's like 3 and 3. So 3 p.m. There you go. Yeah. So we do a second one because we realized the first session would catch most of the people who are awake in North America, Europe, Africa, and South America, and then we could catch the back end of North America and Asia, Oceania on the second one because we're TCK. So
that's right. So like when we picked our moderators, we also wanted to make sure that our moderators were spread out around the world. Again, because when Amanda and I first met and started talking about these things, we were like, who's not at the table? It's usually like European or American, North American people sort of having these conversations when you think of like a TCK or an expat with a capital E, and that's, we know that there's a deeper community out there, and so everything from the very logistics, we try and make it so that it is the most exclusive community that we can possibly create, with the exception that we still only do it in English. And I think if we could just do it in Spanish at some point, we would be able to pick up a lot of South America and Central America.
South America is the only place we do not have a moderator. So we did a really small sample, and this is just to give you a flavor, just to see what we're dealing with. So this is sort of our age breakdown. If you notice, most of our TCKchat participants right now are between 26 and 35, millennials and Gen Xers. Shout out to the old people. Seriously.
Wow.
Seriously.
Wow.
Hold on. We're seasoned TCKs. So I like to call out my colleagues in the Maryland Gardeners who come out. And I say that because I want you to see that even though it may skew a little bit on the younger side, we have a place for you if you're a TCK wherever you are on the spectrum.
Way to clean it up, Amanda.
And honestly, our more veteran TCKs are probably the most popular of all our sessions. People love when they're there. So this just gives you just a good visual background. I think maybe the thing, just so you get an idea of what our age ranges are. Current locations, part of the reason North America is heavily represented, I think partially is because of the language issue, but we are very proud, if you kind of look at the rest of the world, that we've got such strong representation from Africa, because very often that voice is not brought to the expat table. Just really, really proud about that. We're really proud of our Asian participation as well. And honestly, one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that we're digging deeper into those communities that you don't see as much research or conversation around. Looking at our next slide, this is kind of wonky, but I'll explain why the US is great. We just made a really quick map of some of the countries that are of the sample size of where our participants have lived. And the way this map did it is that it highlighted the colors where the most people have lived in that country are the more pronounced. So, for example, while the U.S.
like the most participants have reported living in the U.S., they are not necessarily Americans. They just at some point during their TCK experience, their family was posted or based in the U.S. That being said, if you just even look at the data, the highest we've gone everywhere from 1 international move to 7 international moves, and this is all before the age of 19. 23% of our participants have dual citizenships. So here are some of the reasons why they moved. I don't think this is anything that's surprising to our community. I mean, it's everything that you would expect. We did break out that for some kids, they identified that's because of their parents furthering their own education. And in some situations, the TCK moved, but the family didn't move because there were better academic opportunities for that student in another country.
And one thing I just had to point out on a personal level, so this is our wonderful Mary, who is a college scholarship recipient. She's a college scholar this year. She's in the back. She's also one of our moderators. And also, we're going to talk about her profile in a second. Anyway, this is her going to Canada. So, you know we hate to ask that question, where's home? So I guess, where's your passport from? And that was still complicated. It's like, we got a lot of questions. Well, I used to have this passport, but now I have this passport. Now I married someone else, and we have dual passports. So this is just to give you just a general idea. If you see this, honestly, once again, the dual citizenship, we just had to give them their own category because there's so many people who had more than one passport. But all right, and then also sometimes an interesting question is racial identity, because quite a few of our participants are multiracial, and so we're very about being not exclusive, inclusive. Yeah. So we leave our terms really general with a lot of space to explain where you fall in. And I think we got, people listed 4 or 5 different things. People broke down their tribal ethnicity, which was awesome and representing that. But I think this also gives you an idea how diverse our population is. And I think when you look at more traditional literature, expat capital E communities out there, it's the numbers would be opposite. It would be predominantly Caucasian. So again, it just goes back to our whole point about just trying to really bring more people to the table that have exactly the same experiences. So okay, that's data, right? But I want to sort of profile 3 people that are big important members of our TCKchat community to just sort of really bring the humanity to what we're talking about. So this is Michael, and Michael is a moderator. So again, he's one of those people that helps us facilitate the TCKchat on Twitter every couple weeks. And he's got a really interesting story. He definitely would not fit the definition of expat with a capital E, well, maybe later on in his life. And he definitely wouldn't fit the third culture kid definition, as if you were going to be really rigid about that definition. But he certainly does fit the cross-cultural kid definition, if you're familiar with that. So as you can see, he's Arab American, but his parents, their roots go back to Syria, Iraq, and Anatolia, but he's born in Kentucky, and I know it's not here, but I know also that he was one of the only people that had his background, that looked like him, that kind of thing, where he was living in Kentucky. So just on a daily, every single day, he was navigating multiple cultures and constantly having to adjust himself to fit other people's expectations, including his own family. But then his parents were also have a background in mobility, and they were mobile growing up themselves, and so he has that background. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what he's sort of, why he comes to TCKchat, why does he call himself the third culture kid, and why this community has been so important to him. And I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it'll sort of hit home a little bit for you. So anyway, that's one of his. And this is Mary. So if you can see, we've got their Twitter handle up here, so if you want to follow them, you can. So this is Verily Mary. And so what's cool about Mary's background, and again, I think this is some of these things that maybe we overlook, is that she talks about how her father is, I hope I'm going to pronounce this right, FIGT, right? FIGT, yeah. And her mother is Igbo in Nigeria, but you grew up in a Yoruba area, community, right?
Yeah, so ethnic, Igbo, and then Yoruba.
Yoruba, right. So, so already just in Nigeria, she's having this multicultural and mobile really experience. But then growing up, then from Nigeria, she moves to Canada and eventually the United States, where she's based now. And so again, we can see also how like this sort of maybe informs some of her choices, her lives, and but that's another person that again, if we just maybe use some of these terms, we might miss some of the diversity within Mary's experience. Okay. This is Benjamin, and Benjamin, he's not here, but he is in Baltimore, and he joined the TCKchat community quite randomly. I don't think we like recruited him, but he's like he's constantly in our chats, and he's Native American. So he's from Canada, and grew up on a reservation. And within that reservation, there were multiple tribes and multiple languages. I'm probably not using the right terminology, but there's multiple languages, sort of multiple peoples. And then so he would navigate the people within his own reservation, and then go off the reservation, and then have to also interact with the Canadians there in Quebec. So again, as he's growing up, he's being influenced and changed by these multiple cultures, having to navigate, and in his own way, even though the distance is small, he's definitely sort of mobile, if that makes sense, in his own way. So now he definitely wouldn't be considered a third culture kid, although I think this is exactly what Ruth Van Raken was talking about when she says cross-cultural kid, and she specifically talked about Native Americans. But anyway, so this is his story. He's there at almost every single chat, contributing, and completely considers himself a third culture kid. So, and we welcome him with open arms.
And sidebar, one of the things I think we're seeing, I just started seeing recently, is we're starting to see an increase of Native American students and Native American adults. Because we might be outside of Native American cultures, one of the few places where we could talk about navigating different cultures, and it resonates with them. And even in just the last chat we had last week, I was like, oh my gosh, we never think of traditionally about mobility, what it means to be Native American in Canada, or to be in the US, or to be in Australia, or wherever. And all of a sudden, we have a community where they're a part of, because we're very inclusionary and not exclusionary.
And in North America, I mean, it really is, I mean, from everything that I've listened to from some of our participants and people that can really connect from a Native American perspective to the third culture kid perspective, that it really is like traveling to another country when you're going to the I don't know what you call it, but like to the US, for example, if you're like Navajo or something like that. So that's really cool.
So what led TCK chatters to the term TCK? Okay, we asked a survey. The funniest one we got to this question was, I learned I was a TCK on BuzzFeed. Someone did one of those listicles, and someone checked off the list all the things and went, oh my god, I'm a third culture kid. I didn't even know. So part of that, I think, while it is funny, reminds us that we know that term maybe in this room, but there's so many TCKs that don't know that the experience applies to them. Particularly my work was working with Black, who would be Black TCKs for wherever they moved to, didn't even know that third culture kid applies to them because they were not in an international school, yet they moved like 6 countries, right? So they don't know. So even this term, we find ourselves explaining to people on Twitter. We find ourselves explaining to people on Twitter because they'll see everything going, the topic is trending, and they go, what's a TCK? And I'll see all these people going, this is what a third culture kid is. And people go, oh my gosh, I'm one. And they're like, can we join? So, but many of these, the book has been really instrumental by David Pollock and Ruth Van Raken. Obviously, for some people, they learned when they went to college. We saw a lot of that. A lot of people who took an anthropology class, who took a sociology class, and a professor mentioned third culture identity. That's the first time they heard it, and they were looking for a word for their experiences. A lot of folks referenced identity confusion and started doing research on their own. They just didn't know where they fit in and just sort of came across a blog or a website, and then related to others who shared. So maybe there was something where someone spoke and they went, oh, I know, that feels like my experience. And my office is actually at a university, and there were a whole bunch of people who saw a talk on TCK and thought that's really interesting, and then all of a sudden half the room really saw the light go off, this is my experience. So they're so many ways students are, or not students, but individuals are learning about it, and it's not really the ways that we're thinking that they do.
One other thing. I think the other cool thing that we saw in the responses was that other TCK chatters found other TCKs. Like, hey, you and I grew up in the same place. I just learned I'm a TCK. You're a TCK, and you should come to TCKchat. The other cool thing about Twitter is, I mean, I'm totally a believer now. I was like, Amanda's like telling me about this idea of Twitter chats. I was like, I don't even know how to use Twitter. I think I have an account. Like, I don't understand. It's so weird. But I'm totally a believer now. It flattens things, so you can really have access to people that you might not always have access to. And you can find people and connect with them, and then you can get off the internet and actually do something interesting. But I mean, like, use it as a tool, not a lifestyle. You know what I'm saying?
You can share a house with 6 of them in Amsterdam.
Yeah, that's what we're doing right now. Thanks to Twitter. So, but I will say that one of the cool things that I know I've done to recruit people to come join the conversation at TCKchat is just using hashtag overseas, like hashtag multicultural, and I read the people's feeds, and if I start to make the connection, hey, you know what, you kind of fit the third culture kid term, I might tweet them and say, do you know you're a third culture kid? And like maybe link to something, or say, hey, you know, we're talking about race, but from a global context, and everything you're saying here, I think, you know, could be interesting, but less wordy. And then we invite them. So that's been another cool way to get people into the community.
So Ellen referenced this before. We use Storify, and Storify is basically an application where you can scroll through a bunch of tweets and make it into a more cohesive story. So we have thousands of tweets that are going on, but then I will pull maybe 90 of them, and you can sort of see them as a slideshow. We have had, to date, and so about a year and a half, we've had 40 discussions. They have ranged in everything from identity, which is a super popular topic. We did a 3-part series on race. So it was just race is how they saw themselves, racism, racial privilege. Those are really, really robust discussions. Global identity and versus national identity was our first topic. And to be perfectly honest, identity probably threads through all the topics we do, even when it gets to something as simple as travel. Global citizenship, that was really intense debate. There's a lot of love-hate with that term at TCKs. You would be amazed how vicious that discussion can get. One of the things I really liked was talking about extended family relationships. Part of the reason we did that discussion is that as TCK started talking about their parents and their parent relationships with expat parents, they started talking about going home and what it's like to deal with aunt, uncle, and everybody else who has not moved. And that's an interesting topic. If anybody wants to just do research, like relationship between grandparents who are away, cousins who are away, what happens when you return and no one else has moved but you have, that is a fascinating discussion. And then dating, of course. Anything with relationships. Am I dating another TCK? Or do I find another TCK today? Is there a TCK Tinder? Like, I think that's $1 million idea.
We 2 TCK chatters found each other.
Not gonna mention
names.
And met up in a country somewhere near here. We also get very excited when our TCKers have babies. Like, what just happened? We're like, oh my gosh, we have our first baby. We're very excited. But while the topics up here are serious, we have fun ones, right? So we do food, we do culture, we do travel. I mean, you can imagine the travel one is all travel pics. It's like Instagram Central, right? It's like, this is where I went, this is where I'm going, this is where we should go. But we try to lighten it up and not just have some of the heavy stuff, because it is community. And, you know, every time you get together with a group of friends, it isn't always, these are all the things, heavy things going on in my life. These are also the fun things and the things that we celebrate. So I just snapshotted just so you can see, for example. So we had a cafe. How many expat parents are in the room? No, this is good. I'm glad you're here. About a month ago, we did a discussion on the TCK experience versus the expat parent experience. If you get a chance, parents, I would encourage you to read the Storify, and if you need help accessing that, I can show you where. That topic, a lot of people got, as they say, got into their feels. A lot of TCKs got into their emotions. Because there were some very distinct experiences experiences to their TCK experience that they felt that expat parents did not necessarily know, and they were brave enough to put it out on the internet. So that's why I'm like, I do want to put a plug for that. And so we asked this, for one question, and the responses to this was really interesting. So we asked, what aspects of identity, and this is how it goes, have been the most difficult discussing with your parents? And one TCK said, which space I belong in terms of race, because my parents know exactly where they fit. In the case of this TCK, and I know her really well, she has two biracial parents. So she's like, I guess like second gen biracial? Does that make sense? Okay. Her parents, in her case, one had a Nigerian father and a white mother from Vermont in the U.S., and her mother had a Nigerian father and a white mom from France. And the parents met in Nigeria. And she was raised in the Philippines.
Just make it more
So when you look at that context, where do I fit, is a really intense question. We try to ask these questions not just for our own community, but for all of you to see as you're working with students, whether you're a parent, whether you're a provider, whether you're an educator, whether you're just a friend, to see that when you start getting deeper and deeper with the questions, you will find that TCKs have a lot to say. And one of the things that's frustrating, I think, for TCKs is having other people tell you how you should feel and tell you what your experience should be. And sometimes parents do that, but
I'm just going to ask.
Everybody's clearly
but one of the points of contention with TCKs that came out of this discussion was feeling like everyone was telling them what their experience should be based on a book that was read or based on something else another expat said, and they really, as TCKs felt railed against that. Here we go, parents. Again, what's one thing that is frustrating that expat parents sometimes not understand about expatriation as a child? Oh my gosh, and you're in the room. Okay. Sorry. On the spot. It's okay. Expat parents' vantage points of the culture that TCK intersects with is different from the child's. They are not the same. This was repeated throughout. Like, this point was completely repeated. But really, we just highlight this to show you that while we do have fun, part of it is really to talk about this experience in a very meaningful way.
Cool. So we're going to talk about what TCKchat is meant for individuals, and there's TCK chatters in the room too, so we're going to throw the question out to the group. And then we're going to do a little discussion, so that's how we're going to end it. But I wanted to go back to those three profiles that I was talking about, that I just was talking about, and just hear sort of what they had to say when we asked them, why TCKchat, and has it had an impact? How has it had an impact? So here's Mike again, who had parents with Syrian and Iraqi backgrounds, who was born and raised in Kentucky, who now lives in Turkey and is probably moving again soon. So, and I just sort of highlighted the words that sort of, I think, really come up again and again when we're talking in TCK chatters. So just that, he felt that TCKchat, by the sense of understanding and belonging, like what Chris was saying earlier, just that it kind of like cures a little bit of the loneliness issue that we might experience. Support, empathy, a feeling of mutual identity, transcends geography and ethnicity, which is so cool. And I will say that for Amanda and I, when we first sat down and started planning this, when it was just an idea, we remembered that it was very important for us to set the tone of these conversations so that we didn't want it to be a pity party, but we also wanted it to be a place that was safe for people to express some of their feelings. But we didn't want it to be negative or judgmental, which can totally happen on social media, as I'm sure you're all aware. So, and that's also how we chose a lot of our moderators. We listened to the way that they sort of tweeted, and we thought, they've got a really, it's a realistic perspective, and it's positive for the most part, constructive. So, that's sort of how we chose them. So you can see, and I'm not going to read to you, but you can kind of see kindred spirits. He feels at home. A reminder that my struggle is never again one I have to experience alone. I just got chills.
So corny, but it totally disconnects.
Okay, so then Beverly Mary over there in the corner. So she says, true demonstration of ethnic and cross-cultural diversity, real connections, friendships, which is interesting, right? Like you don't really think of like Twitter, that's how you're gonna like actually connect. But again, if you use it as a tool and not a lifestyle, you know, it really does create these amazing connections. And you don't have to be bound by geography. So like it's lighthearted and heavy, all walks of life. And then Benjamin, who's the Native American raised in Canada and living in Baltimore, he says it feels like home. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Far from the forest I grew up in, he says the inner city is far from where I grew up in. When he went to college, he ended up having friends in the like International Student Union. I know, John, you can appreciate this. And he felt really connected to them, and then he didn't have that again as he became an adult and started raising his own kids. And then when he found TCKchat, he felt, okay, I'm not alone. You know, I can laugh, I can reminisce, I can connect again. So raise your hand if you participated in a TCKchat. Yay! Okay, so that's probably like a third, maybe. So what, for you, what has been sort of the impact that TCKchat has had on you, or what's sort of like the meaning that you pull from that you might want to share with the group?
So since Amanda so skillfully changed the elder comments, I'm the grandmother of the group. I have appreciated TCKchat immensely, and part of it is that it bridges such gaps generationally. You never hear people talking about millennials or elderly or anything. It bridges this tremendous gap. So that's one thing. In terms of it is therapy. And I say that in the best possible way. You do not feel, as you said, you do not feel pity parties, but you do feel like you can get your words out there. And something about having to concisely put them into 140 characters is tremendously healing, actually. So those are the couple of things that I would add.
One thing I noticed is that there are like 5-6 questions in you, so if you want, you can just answer each question as it goes along. But what winds up happening is someone will answer something and they'll go, oh yeah, and someone else will say, oh yeah, what was that like? And you feel like a tree branching up where we're off on this other separate conversation. And then, oh my God, we missed the last 2 questions. But what? Go back. And you know, an hour's gone by.
Yes, totally. And you know, TCK is like we could talk forever. So there's like 1,000 conversations. So yeah, definitely.
It's very noisy for being online.
Yes, I know. Whenever I'm on TCKchat, my husband will come home like from work usually, and he'll be like, "It's so loud in here. The TCKchat's going more crazy right now." You're excited. Yeah, right. So, anything else that TCK chatters want to? Yeah.
I think it's just that because it is a tool. But just the feeling that you can connect with all these people everywhere. You know, I'm not traveling. I'm just sitting there in my own home, and the good thing here, I'm seeing people live. Like I'm seeing Marilyn. I've connected with her on Twitter. I've seen Amanda. We've had all these conversations, but we've never met. You know?
And I know you all by your Twitter handles. I don't even know. I'm here like at Marilyn Gardner.
People had like signs in their face. We should totally.
I love the inclusivity of it that you were talking about before. That it's, I'm not a TCK. I'm a CCK, I guess. But so much of it resonates, and I'm a theater maker and storyteller, and those terms are really useful in some situations.
Yeah.
And the informality of Twitter and the shared experience of theater are not places that they're useful. And so it's great to be like, right, okay, my experience is the same and different from all these other people that are doing it, and there's something really great about that connection.
Love it.
Awesome. That like you don't have to fit in, because none of us fit in the box, and some of us fit in the box less than others.
Yeah.
And having that place where it's like, it doesn't matter what box you don't fit in, as long as you just don't fit in a box.
Yes.
It's our box.
It's so true. And I have to just share this because I know it's a captive audience, and then we're going to talk about implications for this work. But I was just recently speaking with the principal of an international high school, and he was telling me that it's like some adults came in to like really encourage creative thought with the students. And they were coming in with their agenda, to like really encourage these international kids how to be creative. Well, these are like international kids; they're like totally creative. And there was a woman, I believe she was technically from Nigeria, but who knows how long her story is. Like when you say where you're from. And the adult in this like group was saying, now it's really important for us to think outside of the box. Now that's good. You're thinking outside of the box. We're thinking outside of the box. And suddenly she just raised her hand. She goes, "Why is there a box?" Oh, I love it. That is such a good good reminder there. So okay, cool. So we wanted to talk about implications for the future. I mean, as we built this, as Amanda said, we've done this for 2 years. It was just an experiment. It's grown, and as I said earlier, we've had people like Lois Bouchon, who wrote a book on counseling, use our material for some of her community education. It's informed some of our work. We've had theater makers look at our work, all kinds of stuff. And we certainly have a vision for the future, but as you're all listening to this, for those of you that are new to this concept of TCKchat, or those of you that have been part of the community already, what do you think are the, where are the opportunities here, if that makes sense? How could this be used and useful, if that makes sense?
More than one language. I mean, you were saying that there really wasn't very a South American thing. Does anyone else here speak Spanish? And if you do, let me know, and I'll help you set up one in Spanish.
Yeah. And like Mandarin too.
Or Mandarin,
I
think when I approached the TCKchat, one of the things that really interested me academically, but also in terms of community building, is precisely the capacity of making a community building through. And that's what really took me, because it's like it's a tool of making a community sense, and to exploit this in a globalized world using social media. This is something that needs to be explored further on. I've been using some of the chats, as you know, for understanding how the TCKs are building their identity through the chats. And this is really interesting. And how is it not just a tool, but also the topics that are discussed, how are they discussed, and how are the topics introduced by themselves to represent themselves. So it's from a grassroots tool, and it's really, really powerful. I think it's really what I'm very impressed with what you have done. And how you can really develop into a community, community making.
I think that's a really good point too. It's been interesting just from my perspective to look at the content of the conversations, but then also the structure of it, if that makes sense, the sort of like the building of it and how it comes alive and like the organicness of it, for lack of a better word.
The words that I used.
The words, the language.
What words are you using to define yourself? And that's a very qualitative study about how this is, all the adjectives, all the words that define TCK by themselves. And that's why you can use that. It's very easy to analyze through.
Definitely.
We are very, I was going to say real quick, we're very particular about the language. We both come from a counseling background. So when we did more of our heavier topics, we did one on mental wellness, and we did one on the struggling TCK, which are other two you may want to look at. We asked TCKs what are the topics and the issues that have arisen in their communities, that they've seen in their communities, that they haven't been able to talk to with their parents, that haven't been talked about the expat community, the struggles, as well as mental wellness. And we had a TCK who's a licensed counselor provide the questions for that. Because mental wellness was a lot of issues when you get to depression, anxiety, eating disorders, gender identity are not things that are discussed out in the open. And we were very sensitive. Every question we asked, we actually are very sensitive as to how we word it, because we don't want to trigger anyone, if you know that term, and cause anyone harm. And kind of just even something I want to add personally about implications for the future as you start to think about sort of what we can do with this. So I recently launched something called the Black Expat. That was almost a direct result of conversations that I was seeing as a moderator from Black TCKs who felt their experiences were not being documented, noted, the experiences of their parents. And there were questions, as a moderator, we can see everything that's happening with the TCKchat handle or the hashtag, and they would get into these intense conversations about what it meant to be the only Black kid at a school in Paris, what it meant to be a Black kid moving within predominantly Black communities, but it's not their culture. What it meant to be that they couldn't find books and resources on their experience. And that is really just a direct of this and saying that there are a lot of voices, and that's just one community. If you really get into some of the Middle Eastern communities and some of their experiences, those TCKs who come have a lot to say. And so from a very basic level, it's sort of like taking off what you think about what we're talking about in the expat community, because there are a lot of stories that are left on the table.
Yeah, it really ends up being a springboard for other ideas, and like we've said, Amanda and I have talked about that, it helps to further support, whether it's through the formal program or even just like informing a friend how to be supportive or something like that. I will also say for Sea Change, so I run a mentoring program for third culture kids between 16 and 23-year-olds, and they originally, there's a curriculum involved, and originally it was on social emotional development stuff. And through TCKchat, one of the biggest questions that kept coming up was, I'm a millennial, like I'm somewhere in my 20s. I want that global life back. How do I do that? What kind of a job am I supposed to get? Or how do I talk about my internationalness where I won't turn somebody off, or where it will actually be fruitful? All kinds of questions around career seeking and really building their adulthood. And so through seeing that, and then talking to Amanda about it, we built a whole new curriculum on, like the soft skills that you need for careers and that sort of thing. And I think we'll continue to go in that direction. So as people in a support world, it's really improved our practice.
I think one of the things I'm an adult third culture kid, but I also raise third culture kids, and I would really encourage parents, you can get such a window into the world of TCKs if you're willing to look at the TCK chats. One of the things I've found often is that expat parents tend to want to listen to each other, and I think sometimes it's difficult for them to listen to third culture kids. And that's open for discussion. But you can get this amazing window into the world of TCKs if you look at the responses. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah. How young how old are the youngest members of the group?
I think that we've got the youngest is
they're about 18, although we phrase conversations that if there was a high schooler or secondary, and we've had 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds participate, but we keep it very clean.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. That's the role of the moderators too. So again, like when we talked to the moderators and said, we need to keep this constructive. We can still talk about the challenges, but let's think about it like this was hard and I've learned from it this way, something like that. So it's constructive. In the same way, the moderators are there to maintain that tone so that it doesn't get crazy. Which I think like it's such a respectful, beautiful community that maybe all of the community members sort of set the tone. So you're not like talking about like doing drugs or like you're not like cursing or that kind of stuff.
And honestly, whenever we have some of these heavier topics, we always ask this question: okay, what would you like with the expat and TCK parents? What are the best ways to like approach parents and talk about how can we, we try to provide constructive questions so it isn't just oh my gosh, my mom and dad did this. Then it's like, okay, but for other expat parents, how would you improve ability? So we try to also offer solutions.
Any other questions or,
I'm afraid to even say this because this is going to open up an enormous topic here. But Julia and I were talking before this even began about the implications this might have for the refugees who are entering Central Europe. I work every week with unaccompanied minors from Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And these are all kids who have phones. That's their one connection to their past, to their hopeful future. And they aren't all Anglophones. I mean, I'm teaching German to kids who cannot converse in English, so we're speaking pantomime to one another to learn German to integrate. But I look at this and I think if they had any idea, number one, what TCK is about.
Totally.
Right. Yeah. But if they had an opportunity to interface with kids of their age, and I'm working with 13 to 19-year-olds, how could that be done on this? Because they're primarily Arabic or Farsi speakers.
Wow, that's amazing.
So,
Some are English speaking. Those who have come from a very privileged and unusual background have been educated
in English.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, when I even think about the language, we do have Arabic speakers in our crowd. I think it would be something to sort of think about a way to, if we have enough of a population, maybe engaging with some of our older, and I'm saying older, this is like 25 and up, right?
So people my children's age, right?
Ancient people, 25 and older.
25 and older. So 25 and you can speak Arabic, anybody, right? I do think that there are people in our community who are interested in that. I think we've talked in our community about refugees, because I think our community would define those because it's TCKs.
Yeah.
Like, we don't say that is a specific TCK experience, but we would be like, oh, they're totally TCK. Some of them have lived in more countries than some of us.
Right.
Based
Or
on
in the last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think that there's something for exploring, and as we think about the future, how to connect with those who are dealing with really the instability. As long as they're connected, we can find them.
But what a cool idea, and you're totally right about what they do have is their phones. I mean, there's implications for a lot of populations. Because, you might not have a computer or access to a computer, but most people do have their phones. And the other interesting, I would say, like, if you were to set something up like that, if you wanted to be very specific to, like, that's like 13 to 17-year-olds who are refugees coming from Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq, I would say that I think these are things that have been useful for us. I think the fact that Amanda and I have counseling backgrounds has been helpful. I mean, in some ways, to know what not to talk about on Twitter, because we have that conversation a lot.
Oh yeah.
A lot. Like, people will say, "Oh, let's talk about, like, sexual abuse," and I'm like, "That Twitter is not the place, you guys. Like, I know you're 25 and you put everything out there, but it's not the place, and we don't know who's just listening and not contributing, and we have no idea what they're going home to. So we're, as much as we're, thinking about topics to talk about, we're talking about topics we should not be talking about, and we also, will say, oh, if you need help, there's this wonderful book here, or there's this counseling directory that you can, so we know what resources are out there. So I'd say coming from some sort of like human development, social work, psychology background would probably be helpful. I think also, this is like HR 101, but I think, Amanda and I, as we've said over and over, it's so important for us to have a diverse community, and so we needed to make sure that our moderators and ourselves sort of represented the diverse community that doesn't always get included. So I think in this case, then you'd want people, who speak Farsi, who speak Arabic, maybe could identify on some level, so that if there isn't yet another barrier to them getting access to, really personalized understanding.
So you don't think, if I'm understanding correctly, you don't think it would be helpful for me to direct these kids next Wednesday when I'm sitting with them, to direct them to TCKchat?
No, I think you could. Yeah.
I think the language may be the biggest barrier.
Because we welcome.
But we would totally welcome. If they came, we'd be like, come on, join the party.
Right.
And that would be enormously helpful. The language barrier is something. It's not just to participate, but also to reach. Because
exactly.
The Spanish-speaking community is not represented, and the French-speaking community is not.
It's true.
It's just the English community
that is
represented in TCK's community.
It's so true.
And there is a lack of reaching this community.
I absolutely agree.
And I don't know how to reach that, because it's really important, because I guess that because language makes also an experience.
Absolutely.
It may be another experience for them as a TCK.
I mean,
they don't know that they are TCKs.
I totally
because
agree
it's
about
a very English.
Sure. And I also think that, so if you think about, I don't know if this is just a Hong Kong thing or if this is, China as well, mainland China as well. But I know there's this term of, I think it's like returning turtles or something. I can't remember what the translation is, but it's this idea of like people that left Hong Kong and now have come back, and it just sort of references the difficulty of adjusting culturally. And in Japan, they have their own term. There's different cultures have different languages for people that have been away and return. And so I think if we were to use those terms in their language, then we certainly would be able to recruit them. And unfortunately, Amanda and I don't speak those languages. But I think that, but for the future, as we grow, it'd be amazing to have like a Mandarin
And
group.
I was just going to say to your point, I've been thinking about that French one for a long time. I think particularly the Francophone experience, and I always reference like the African TCK. There's so many of them that I have to explain that don't know that they're TCKs because no one's ever used the term. And I had someone go, how am I third culture kid? I'm like, you were born in Mali, but you grew up in Saudi Arabia. and then you came back and then became an expat and didn't know all those terms apply. I think part of what we have to do is, and this is honestly a future thing, is look who's in our community and is comfortable tweeting in those languages. So some of us are very great verbally, but it's being able to communicate writing in those languages. But it's definitely one of the things that's on our list, at least with, the French and the Spanish at least. I don't know if we can do Yoruba, although there are a whole bunch of Nigerians, we might be able to do that.
We have a lot of Nigerians,
we can.
That's true.
Is there a list of actual direct translations of what, like, in English CCK? I speak Spanish, but I have no idea what it is in Espanol, or in French, or in Arabic, or in...
That's a wonderful question.
Yeah, just to respond to that, there was somebody asked that a few months ago, I think it came up, and so we put it out actually on Twitter and on Facebook, and some, I don't remember all of them because I don't know all of the languages, but some people said there's actually a specific term in certain languages than others. Like, I know that there were a couple of people who have been doing research on this in French, and they literally translated it. They took third culture kid and put it en de la troisième culture.
Okay.
I don't know if there will be other terms, but I think that's something that I've been trying to figure out precisely so that it can be talked about and there can be terms to explain it, because the truth is, let's stop pretending that all TCKs or CCKs come from an Anglophile background. And I think for TCKchat, was going to say, which Amanda kind of said, is I think a lot of us would like to have it in different languages to get everybody else. But it's true that TCKchat is amazing and we all love being a part of it, but it is all volunteer based. So most of us doing this, are juggling a whole bunch of things. Like Amanda and Ellen, I think, who are our founders, our fearless leaders, do like a million things at the same time. And so we all are happy to give our time to this, but it's true that it gets really tough, and you have to make sure you have people who are fluent enough in it, and that there's enough people that we can say, okay, hey, there's enough of us, and we're all available enough to do a chat about this in French or in Spanish or in Mandarin or in Arabic or Farsi and all those languages. If we could do it, if we had enough people speaking those languages, I think we would all be like, fine, we'll make sure there are more than 24 hours in a day and we'll figure it out. So anyone here wants to
recruit more volunteers.
Anyone here wants to get involved or has ideas or speaks these languages and knows enough people who would build that community, let us know. We will tweet us, email us, whatever. We'd love to hear it. We would love to be able to do it. It's just there's only so many of us and only so many languages we know. And
Totally.
So, but we're ready to do it if we can. So.
Done.
Question from the old people. But first of all, I'm greatly encouraged. Since I'm not on Twitter. I think I only joined Facebook about exactly a year ago. So I'm definitely a late adopter. But I was encouraged by you saying that you weren't on Twitter because I thought you were born on Twitter. I've always had that idea. But I guess I'm asking this as a therapist and wondering what the follow-up, how you guys conceptualize follow-up for themes that even though you want to, I think it sounds like you're doing a great job just like trying to sort of boundary the conversation. There's people who accidentally, or even intentionally kind of want to I don't mean crash the conversation with their agenda, but they might actually really need to. And I'm just wondering how this sort of nascent organization has thought about how to follow up with them. And just how does that work? I mean, if you have somebody do that in a conversation, I guess I'm wondering, what does a moderator do when somebody throws something that, this is going the wrong direction, and it needs follow-up? What does that look like?
I think Amanda's done a really good job on like following up with some people and just checking in. I mean, she's like the social butterfly in the duo. So I mean, I think that's probably been helpful, but it's a really good point. And I don't know if we do enough of that. We don't bill ourselves as like counseling or mental support. However, we are counselors or we have counseling backgrounds, and the TCKchat information that exists out there to educate you on how a Twitter chat works and what the questions are coming up for the next conversation are on both of our websites. So, which is these are two services that we provide to the cross-cultural and expat third culture kid community. But beyond that, I mean, it's. What else you'd say?
I was going to say, one of the things that I think would help us, just even thinking about board, and that's a really good question, is starting to even create sort of a general provider hub, like even on our website, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in Europe and you're in this part of Europe, this is at least a professional you can connect, especially if you're dealing with like eating disorders, something that's outside of our general realm of things that we can do. Sorry. Because I think that you're right. I mean, as you start to grow, and we've been growing and we're constantly growing, their TCKs are going to feel comfortable telling us stuff because they see us. But I think we're smart enough as counselors also to say, that's not my area of expertise, but let me connect you to someone who understands. And I think for us, what we probably need to do a better job is better partnering with the resources that are out there, or at least being able to put a TCK or a parent, to be honest, or a parent, because some parents come in and say, this is an issue you guys are dealing with, here are some trusted resources to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be super quick. It was just to build on what Amanda was saying. I know it's come up. There's certain chats, the serious ones or the lighter ones. There have been questions that have come up. Either someone says something and you realize, okay, they're clearly looking for something more than what we can provide, or people ask. There have been people who have asked. I'm living in whatever area, and I'm looking for, do you know if there's counselors here or whatever? And I know that we've shared resources and books. I have definitely shared several times. People asked the International Therapist Directory.
Yes.
I've sent them links for the direct country or city they're in, or just the general one. And I said this has been created by TCK for TCKs around the world, and these are licensed therapists and counselors. And we also make sure we have certain books, whether it's Lois's book, Bouchon, or other books like that. And it really depends what they ask, what they're looking for. We try to really give them websites, books, or names directly of people who kind of work in that area that can help them. So it's hard. You can't know exactly what's going through their mind, but we try to provide as many resources as we can. And if we don't know, we say, check with Ellen, I think, and we'll copy Ellen in that comment. Be like, she should know, she should be able to direct you to this and this. Or, hey, this person has also gone through this and works in this area. Contact them. If you want us to put you in direct contact, let us know. So we try to do that as best as we can.
Definitely. And when we choose the moderators, again, we looked for people that had like deep networks or, sort of connected people, whether it was just online or in real life, but people that we knew could sort of expand beyond TCKchat. But it's a great point. I'm reading some thoughts. One last question and then we have to wrap up.
If you don't mind, I just want to make a comment about the refugee component.
Yeah.
I work with refugees, and I think that it's important just to recognize sort of two differences.
Yeah.
And yes, third culture kids, but maybe don't self-identify as that right away. And they're dealing with so many survival issues in the first few years of becoming a refugee that I'm not sure they relate to some of the topics.
Yes.
But also, there's a really significant need for anonymity online for refugees who are still fleeing. There's a lot of safety considerations for family members back home. So if we're working with youth, we probably want to avoid encouraging them, I think, to get online. Unless it's done in a way that's really safe.
That's such a good point. And then you make me think too of the trauma of moving in that kind of a situation, leaving a traumatic situation, and then the actual process of leaving
potentially what they experienced
prior to leaving, right?
Complicated.
And the departure could be traumatic, and so in the counselor in me is like, Twitter's not what you need right now. Like, come to Twitter once you get your basic needs sort of sorted out. Yeah, it's a good point. Well, thank you so much. Look, check this out. This is Amanda's, her counseling practice. This is the Twitter handle that she uses for TCKchat. This is the Black Expat, the new project that she's working on. And this is mine. This is I chat with this, my organization's handle. And these are our websites. If you're, after listening to us for an hour, if you're like, I still don't exactly understand what you're talking about technologically, I completely understand. Thank God I have an amazing coach who continues to coach me technologically. But if you go to Amanda's website, she explains exactly what a Twitter chat is, how to make it work, how to read about it, etc. So don't feel inadequate. I'm Gen Xer. I'm not a digital native, so I had to learn myself. So awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Put a handle on your badge if you want. That might be easy for you to find.